Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
ගහන ගේම් අපි දන්නවා මෙතෙන්ට ඇවිල්ලා අපි අරගල කරා වගේ අරගල කරන්න හදපුවත් අපි දන්නවා ජීවත් වෙන කවුරුද 50 අපි 400ක් ජීවත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ ඒ 50 සතුටින් ඉන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ මුන් රටේ ඉන්න මිනිස්සු ඔක්කොම විකුණා කයිමු නැන්දලා ඉන්න කතාවට ඔයාලා එකයිද කියන්නකෝ නැන්දලා ඉල්ලන්නේ අපිත් එක්ක මේ වෙලාවේ එකතු වෙන්න සර් ඔයාලා විතරයි අපිත් එක්ක එකතු වෙන්න ඕනේ ආරපන්නේ 225 පන්නන්න පුළුවන් සර් අපේ තාත්තලාත් ඔයාලාද සර් මගේ තාත්තෙක් මේ අඬන්නේ නියම තාත්තෙක් වෙන්නේ නියම රාජ්‍ය සේවකයෝ බොරුවට රකින්න එපා අපිට අන්න දෙන්න අපේ තාත්තලා කෝටිපතියෝ නෙමෙයි කුලී වැඩ කරලා අපිට කන්න දෙන්නේ ඒ මිනිස්සු රැට අඬනවා සර් පහවදා 6 කිලෝ කියන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා 5000 පඩියෙන් අපි 4 දෙනෙක් හදන්නේ සර් රුපියල් 500ක් වුණාම පරිප්පු කිලෝ එක රුපියල් 500ක් වුණාම කොහොමද සර් අපිට කන්න දෙන්නේ කොහොමද කන්න දෙන්නේ අපි කැම්පස් යවන්නේ.
And good evening and warm welcome to Newsline Live. These protests have been so intense and so moving that, as that clip showed you, even a policeman on duty there was moved to tears by the pleas of his fellow man, a fellow citizen of Sri Lanka. And to discuss what exactly these protests means and what is the wider picture, I have with me here former Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, Ms. Ambika Satkunanathan. Very good evening to you, Madam, and welcome to Newsline Live.
Good evening, Faraz. Thank you for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. What does it all mean? What does these protests mean?
Well, I think the protests are quite important or momentous, because at least in my living memory, I don't know about yours, I can't remember different sections of society coming out to demand for their rights without an organized element behind it, like without political parties or without trade unions. Because if you go to Galface, what you see is people from all social backgrounds. You see people of different ages, elderly people, you see families with young children, teenagers coming with parents. You also see a lot of students. So you see people from different walks of life, but it's not just that. You have the farmers who are protesting, the fishermen, the carpenters in Moratuba protesting.
The IT industry.
The IT industry. So in a sense, you have different sections of society all turning up. But in the midst of it, we must also not forget that there are people in the north and the east who have been protesting for far longer. And they too have been demanding something that the current protests are also demanding. Maybe on a different issue, but accountability. Accountability of those in positions of power. Now, the people in the north and east for years have been demanding for accountability for human rights violations. Here they are demanding accountability for provision of services, for responsible use of public resources. They want answers about procurements that were done violating procedures, allegations of corruption. So at the core of this lies accountability, political accountability, and the right of the citizen to demand for their rights. For Sri Lankans, particularly the middle class Sri Lankans, we haven't seen them going out into the street. This, I would say, is the very first time. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Faraz. Therefore, I think it is quite momentous that so many people are fearlessly voicing their concerns and demanding their rights.
And this whole accountability issue, you know, isn't there a danger that this people's movement that we see in Sri Lanka right now, from north to south, from east to west, in the hills, everywhere, people are protesting. I am told that some of the protests in the former conflict areas are not as easy to have because of various sort of threats, if you like, okay? But apart from that, the fact is that isn't there a grave danger that the whole country may actually miss this opportunity to harness the people's power and to make the changes that are needed? Actually, you know, so at the beginning when I went and attended some of these protests, I noticed that the people were not really saying, get out to the government. What they were wanting is they wanted a planned economy. They wanted a real commitment to change and a real commitment to solve the issues of the day, not some dumb, ill-thought-out policy to take Sri Lanka into the organic age of agriculture production. The whole world has only 1.7%. At any rate, under 3% is the global output for organic produce. But no, in Sri Lanka they want to do it overnight, bang, 100% overnight. That's absolute tosh. So the people wanted that. You know, they wanted real change. But isn't there a danger now? And we saw, you know, the Prime Minister, Mahinda Rajapaksa, come on air and say some of the old things that we're all used to him saying, you know, about
I
the
missed
war.
that, I'm
no,
afraid,
yes,
yeah.
but, you know, it's the same old wine, if you can call it. It's all spoilt and, you know. So shouldn't we really make a start by, for example, remembering that the chief accounting officer of any ministry is the secretary to the ministry. Now, unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, the president, under Article 52, Section 1 of the Constitution, has the right to appoint whoever he wants as the ministry secretary. Now, don't you think that that ought to be stopped forthwith and make the ministry secretaries accountable, put it in the penal code, and if they play about, bang, they go to prison?
Okay, so firstly, I think you raised the issue of the public service.
Yeah.
We do have a bloated public service, and I was just reading, I think it was an economist who had written an article today saying that from 800,000, it is now 1.1 million persons.
Right.
And that also means not just salaries, but it also means pensions. And the public service has also become, because it has been politicized, as you say, and that depends on who appoints it, the process of appointment, who can hold you accountable. And because of that, it has become an instrument of patronage. So certain people would want certain ministries. Why? Because through those ministries, you can give jobs to your constituency, which means it has become a vehicle for politicians to ensure that they will be elected next time. In relation to rules and structures, yes, I think our constitution, we have, you know, we're like 20th Amendment talking about the 21st Amendment, but what we do need is a new constitution, and a new constitution based on values, human rights values, that protects human rights, that leaves room for accountability, and also abolishes the executive presidency, because the executive presidency is also one of the main causes of the politicization, of lack of accountability, how much power the president holds, even, for instance, to declare a state of emergency, which can be in force of 14 days until it is voted on by the parliament. So for 14 days, the president can issue emergency regulations under which you can restrict so many rights. Therefore, the abolishing of the executive presidency is key. And as you know, the 20th Amendment extended the powers of the president, and thereby holding them accountable has become difficult. And, you know, Professor Gannath Obesekara, one of our foremost anthropologists, I think he predicted in 1984 that because of the executive presidency, soon you will have a parliament that is not representative of the people, but is representative of the executive, which
Absolutely.
is exactly what you see
yes.
now.
Well, what if a man with such vision to have said that all those years ago? Now then, Ms. Satkunanathan, the whole problem is one of utter mismanagement, an unplanned economy, and Sri Lanka is paying that price today. I'm not blaming this government or the one before. I'm actually blaming all governments for the last 74 years. They've only engaged in the blame game. They come to Parliament and they waste valuable money, the people's money, and the people's faith in them is also wasted, because they just blame each other. And then, you know, they escape to a subsidized cup of tea and a subsidized meal, and they all have a good laugh, and they get into the cars paid by us and use the fuel paid by us, and they go home sometimes to homes paid by us, and you know, they use their phones, they use their electricity, all paid by the people.
And of course, their staff and often their family members are appointed as their staff members. No accountability or transparency there.
So several are the ladies in their life, mistresses, wives even, who are appointed to these positions. I don't want to get personal.
And also not sexist, Faraz.
No, I'm not. But, you know, that's what happens. This is, we need to say it the way we see it. And that's why Golface today, for I think the third or the fourth day. Third day is actually full of people who are passionate about the one thing. They're passionate about Sri Lanka. It's as simple as that. And there's nothing wrong in being passionate about your country. I must hand it to the authorities that they have not come down with any force. But that's probably because then, you know, they'll have a greater problem to deal with. Don't you think that we need to curtail the powers of the presidency, like you've just been saying? And one of those things is that we need to address corruption very quickly and get rid of this section that allows the president to appoint whoever he deems fit, in his opinion, to head the ministries in terms of the secretary, because he is the chief accounting officer. And we have, the world, including the international press, have noted this, that certain ministries have had people without the necessary administrative expertise and with a background from the military to come and head these ministries. And that has happened more than often in this present government.
We've seen that actually in post-war Sri Lanka. In post-war Sri Lanka, we saw militarization, and that was excessively in the north and the east, where the military began to get involved in civilian affairs. In many ways, so many examples. They started businesses. It was also not felt as much in the south because the military presence, the military camps were in the north. Even civil society organizations were subject to a lot of monitoring. In 2013, I remember the commander would even summon civil society organizations to talk with them, you know, about their development plans and their work plans, etc., clearly overstepping the boundaries. So we have to acknowledge that it's during this regime, when they were in power the first time, that militarization began. During Yahapalana, they really did nothing to dismantle it, to reduce it. It was just a pause button that was momentarily hit. And post-2019 November, it accelerated. That is clearly a problem for us, but it's also generally about corruption. That, once again, has become a part of our culture. It's, of course, the politicized public service, but it's also using public resources, getting into debt to build these development projects, which are largely infrastructure projects. And they prefer infrastructure projects because that is where you can make a lot of money. Certain investigative journalists have been exposing right, about contracts and how procedure was not followed, the corruption. But still, there is no accountability. And we must question the kind of people who also, why do we Sri Lankans, many Sri Lankans, keep electing these people back to power even after they are exposed as being corrupt? That says something about our political culture and this culture of patronage. Where when we speak of members of parliament, I think a good place to start would be, and this is something everyone has been speaking about lately, is also declaration of assets.
Absolutely.
And I mean, not just to the speaker, I mean publicly. I think there are 10 or 11 parliamentarians who have declared it publicly.
Yes. But this is the point. I put it on Facebook, you know, this need to declare, all parliamentarians to declare their assets. And the answer from a former parliamentarian was that, yes, it's actually done and it's available. Well, you know, again, it's flirting with the real truth, with the truth. They're flirting with it. Because the fact is that it is available and you can pay a nominal cost to the Speaker's office and you can get it. But do you know, ladies and gentlemen, that having done that, having gone through the whole palaver of doing that, you know, taking time off, going there and getting it and so on, you can't discuss it even with your partner in bed. You can't do that. And that's why I'm saying to you, shouldn't the call be for complete transparency, not this hanky-panky business, you know, pseudo-democracy, pseudo-transparency, pseudo-anything. It must be available publicly, free of charge, for the public to digest at their own convenience. If it's online, so much the better.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And this is where I think, you know, everyone speaks about good governance, but at the end of the day, even those who speak of good governance do not want to be held accountable, because it was during Yahapalana, I think, that the organization Transparency International,
Absolutely.
they filed asking for the then Prime Minister's as a declaration. They were refused. There is an order from the Right to Information Commission saying that it needs to be given, but they refused. So therefore, they have now they've appealed that to the Court of Appeal.
Yes, and I think that they, in the case of the Prime Minister, they had to go because it's filed with the President's office.
That's right.
And this is all absolute nonsense. This country loves to say that, oh, you know, our former Prime Minister, one of them anyway, you know, was very fond of talking about Westminster-style politics. But let me remind him that Westminster-style politics means that if I want to find out the asset declaration now, the latest one of Boris Johnson, I can do it online. On that note, let's go for a quick break, take a look at this evening's primetime news headlines, and then be back again, okay?
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
Health services in crisis. Shortage of medicine and medical equipment increasing.
සීනි බලන මැෂින් වල කටු පාවා අපිට එළියෙන් ගේන්න කියලා කියනවා.
බේක මේ 500කින් ගේන්න කිව්වා 500කින් නෑ මේ බේක.
What happened at the meeting with the IMF? More deaths reported from queues. Youth protest continues. Protests held in support of the government. Will the general public be able to collect fuel in cans? Sri Lankan actor Hiranabe Sekara wins the Best Actor at the Olivier Awards.
My Sri Lanka is going through a little bit of a tough time now, and I wish I was there with you. Muchanla Mangabalata Adre, Jai Reva.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.
Welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Ms. Ambika Satkunanathan, who's, of course, formerly from the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. Ms. Satkunanathan, what on earth, what do the public mean by 225 go? What do they mean?
Okay,
Why?
there are two aspects to that. One, if you, people who monitor social media, you know, experts on this, have also said that asking the 225 to go, which is the number of the members of parliament, is in a way to distract and diminish, disempower the other campaign, which is asking the president to go. Also, asking the 225 to go is really not practical, because you know what, we can't afford to hold elections now, and there is a constitutional way to dissolve parliament, and we haven't fulfilled the time period for that. There are many constitutional and legal issues, so really we cannot send all 225 home and hold elections. But at the same time, the fact that people ask for all 225 to go is what that illustrates is also their disillusionment with governance, with the kind of politicians we have, because they see, as you say, the theatrics in parliament. They see that these people are not responding to their calls. They see that these people don't want to be held accountable. These people think that they are above the law. So they're asking for a different type of politician, and not one who, because the culture now, Faraz, is also, as you would know, is people use local government elections, or people affiliated with the regimes, different regimes, who engage in thuggery, etc. Many of them, they get into politics. They first get the confidence of the party through their thuggery, etc. Then they get into local government, and then that is how they rise to parliament. And they bring with them that culture of violence, of impunity, of political patronage. And I think what people are saying, particularly the young people who are far more savvy, far more tech savvy, and the young people seem to have a civic conscience. They want answers. They seem to know what being a citizen means.
And on the same sort of line, I'm sure the protesters will be pleased to note, the people will be pleased to note that Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, God bless him, he said here that although in spite of the benefits of organic fertilizer to the country, this is not the correct time, we could have told him that, to continue it, and therefore the government has decided to provide the fertilizer subsidy once again. Well, bravo. Is it a bit too little, too late?
I think that's a perfect example of populist politics and the kind of issues we've had with governance. The fact that they did it overnight, there was no forward thinking, there was no consultation with experts. Even after the policy was made, when experts tried to influence and change the decision, that didn't happen. And now once again, this is a populist decision which they hope will contribute to reducing the dissent.
Their further sort of sustenance.
Exactly, but it has already impacted farmers. I mean, I read that the tea yield, for instance, has reduced. I know that there are very small-time farmers who couldn't buy fertilizer. It became expensive. The Mudalalis had stored it. This is from the north I'm talking about. And because it's becoming more expensive, because they can't get diesel for their various things, for the machines to sow the seeds, what they were telling me, this is from the north, is that many of the smallholders who do agriculture are basically giving it up, and they're giving it to the big Mudalalis.
So the problem
because they can't afford it. They can't afford it. So what you're also doing is you're helping create monopolies here. And monopolies are also where you find a lot of exploitation.
Do you think we need a monopolies commissioner in Sri Lanka?
Well, I haven't really thought about it, and so I don't want to...
Well, I think we do. I've long thought about that. But now look, isn't it sad, ladies and gentlemen, I pose this question to you, isn't it sad that Sri Lanka as a country is of so much of interest to the Americans, remember MCC? Right. The Chinese, and all of that, and even the Indians, right? But when in Parliament they all resigned from their positions and the opposition was asked to take it on, they were apparently unable to show the 113, the magic figure in Parliament. So why is it? Are they just only thinking about their political ideology, rather than thinking about the people of the country who are suffering? That's why a section of the public are still protesting.
I think it's very obvious that the majority of members of parliament do not care about the people, because also the people who resigned and said that they're leaving the coalition but they're going to be independents. What on earth does that mean? And what perhaps the opposition should have done is they should have passed a no confidence motion, which would have showed the public who would have voted for it and who did not, right?
Exactly.
And that way you would have known whether those people claiming to be independent are actually independent, or the resignation was a drama because they know there is a lot of public anger and they're thinking about their future electoral chances. But at the same time, people are hedging their bets. It's like, what if they don't go? What will happen to us? So therefore, they're playing both sides. And what happens now is that it is the citizen who is getting adversely affected yet again.
Newsline Live, that's whom you're tuned into. Newsline Live is, of course, part of the Newsfirst brand. The People's Channel is what it's all about, and we bring you the news and your issues right here on this channel without any fear or favour, for that matter. So, well done, Team Newsfirst. We love you all, don't we? Now then, sorry, we had to say that because sometimes we must say it, and so I've said it now. Right, now then, how on earth do we go forward? Do the public insist that this government must be changed for the better although they were given the mandate, they clearly don't have the mandate anymore, judging from what we see.
Yes, they clearly don't have the mandate, and I think a lot of solutions, different solutions have been proposed, interim government, etc. But what is becoming clear is that the President and the Prime Minister, they do not want to step down, and without the President stepping down, I mean, that is a key demand. And without that, I don't think the people, because the buck stops there, and the people feel that the President has failed, and therefore they demand that he resign. And if he does not, I think everything else will be farcical. The opposition has refused. They do not want to form a unity government, and perhaps they're also afraid to have pass a no confidence motion, because what if they actually win? It means that they have to take charge, and I don't think they want to take charge of this mess, because it means they'll have to make difficult decisions when we, go to the IMF and the IMF bailout comes, and perhaps they're afraid that it will adversely affect their future electoral prospects. So we are in a bind. And of course, we do need what they call political stability. But political stability is not being undermined by the protests. Let us be very clear about that. That is this argument that is being floated about. If people want political stability, what they need to do is impress upon the President that he does need to step down. And they also need to impress upon the opposition and other parties that they must step up. And there are different constitutional options on the table of the impeachment of the President, the no confidence motion, etc. And I heard that the SJV is now drafting the 25th Amendment, and I think the abolition of the presidency is likely to play, be a substantive part of it. So those who want, and I think this is where the business sector comes in. They have a lot of power. Many of them actually funded the current regime and enabled them to come to power, and many of them also
got a tax
benefit.
break.
Well, they also tax break
600 billion rupees,
and many other breaks and favors. So I think if they want stability, and I think the business sector is the one that is talking a lot about stability. It is not the protests that are undermining stability. They need to impress upon this government with which they have great relations.
Whilst you're saying this, I must mention this, but don't you think that this government sort of given the game away when soon after they all resigned, they had to appoint a couple of them because they wanted the chief whip and whatever it is in getting ready to go back to Parliament. But it was interesting that it was one minister who was in charge of the highways, I think, was reappointed. And now we must remind the public that there is some contention about this place, this ministry, the highways, because there's a claim from a Chinese company that their price, the one that is being sort of considered being awarded to, was, and wait for it, ladies and gentlemen, $820 million more than the next one down. Now, normally, if you have such a discrepancy in the pricing, it is far more prudent for the government to cancel the tender and recall it, or for the cabinet-appointed negotiating committee to point it all out. So I think they rather gave the game away in the reappointment of that particular minister.
Absolutely, and I think that is something that has been exposed also by investigative journalist Namani Vijayadasa, who's written extensively and in detail about that.
Yeah.
But also the not following procurement procedures.
Right. Sorry.
Not following procurement procedures is also something that is quite common for us. If you look at the Auditor General's report, for instance, I've been tweeting a lot about the Auditor General's reports on the military and military procurement, which has been done in breach of government procurement procedures. Now, this is where Parliament has also failed, because many of these things are not actually debated. They need to debate it, and there needs to be adequate oversight. But a lot of issues that require debate are not. Most times, many of the parliamentarians are not there.
Are not there.
Are not there.
If a public servant does that, they get their salary docked. But these
Absolutely.
are public servants. They have to only work 5 years to get their pension, whereas the other public servants have to work for 20 blessed years.
But I think
but,
that's,
you know,
but Faraz, there's an interesting word you used. You said public servant. When you're a public officer, you're supposed to serve the public. But here, I think our elected representatives, our members of parliament, do not believe they are serving the public. As I always say this, they behave like demigods and the public are their servants.
Thank you very much. We've run out of time. And that was Newsline Live with Ambika Satkunanathan. Take care, have a great evening, and God bless you.